Greetings viewers, I am Eric the Car Guy and I want to thank you for tuning in today. I'm also going to start by saying that this video is actually taken from a longer video about the assembly of the engine that went into this 1990 C1500 that's behind me. I took the 350 that was in it, turned it into a 383, and this video covers the installation of the lifters, the push rods, the rocker arms, and all those things that work in the valve train. I got all my stuff from Comp Cams. I'll link that down in the description for you. The procedures that I show in here pretty much cover those little details and things that you might want to know if you're assembling the valve train on your engine, in particular a small block Chevy, but I believe a lot of this information will carry over into other engines as well. Anyway, I'm done talking. Let's get to the action already in progress. We'll catch up at the end. See you then. As per instructions, my lifters have been living in a bath of engine oil actually for 2 days now. It wasn't an overnight deal, but now it's gone on a little bit longer than that. They were cleaning everything before they went in the oil, and now they are ready to be installed. But I think you'll see why these have to go in before the cylinder heads, because they stick up too far. Make sure that the link is facing away from the cylinders. You don't have to pump these up or anything, just the soaking will do. So what makes this a roller cam is these little wheels on the bottom here, or what's coming in contact with the cam, reduces friction and frees up horsepower. Off camera, I just tried it. I tried to get these lifters out without removing the cylinder heads, and I was able to do so in this. This has a 9-inch deck height, I believe, and my Ford has like an 8.5, so that ½ inch might be the difference, so that's where that comes in. As long as we're talking about valve train parts, these are not the valve springs and retainers and keepers that came with these cylinder heads. These have actually been switched over to Comp Cam stuff. And as I believe I mentioned earlier, the pocket has been machined a little bit wider so that it can accommodate the washer that goes underneath the spring here. Hopefully it was only wider and not deeper, because AFR is very specific about this not going any deeper than it already is. New push rods, new locks for the rocker arms. The rocker arms are soaking in oil right now. They were cleaned and all that stuff was done previously. These are the retainers for the push rods, and these are the rocker arm studs, and these are also AFR. I'm going to install the rocker studs with the push rod retainers loosely. I'm not torquing them down yet because I have to align the push rods first. I'm also going to use a little bit of this ARP assembly lube on the threads of these as well. And these look like, yeah, I believe these are 3/8. And I'm pretty sure that the AFR heads came with like 3/8 rocker studs already. R and L. These will work something like this. And once you've got these, ooh, that seems awfully tight. Once you've got these installed, they say to weld it together. You can like TIG weld these together. Why am I screwing this up so bad? Okay, R means R, Eric. So R goes like this. Pay attention, stop talking to the camera, and actually build the engine. All right, so as I was saying, what they do is after you get, these have movement, so you can basically figure out the exact placement. So once you've got everything in place and everything's locked down, what they talked about was like TIG welding in here, which I'm not gonna do. I thought about this and I'm like, all right, well, the only time that's gonna matter is when you go to remove, and hopefully that's not on the car. So if the head's off the car, you can weld it then. And TIG welding won't leave like slag or anything flying around like a MIG welder would, but that's what they recommend. So once you've got these in place or whatever, you weld it down, then when you take it off, you can also mark what cylinder this went to, and you can just put this back on as an assembly instead of having to adjust this every time you do this. But this is the first time, so we got to do it. Oh, they were just a little stiff going in at first. Yeah, I'm just going to snug these up for now. Not take them to the final torque. I want them so I can, like I said, I can move these around, like in and out. Why would you prefer screw-in studs over press-in studs? Normally what they do at the factory is they'll press these studs in rather than have them threaded in like this. It's not a high horsepower application. It doesn't have as much stress being put on these components because the push rod on a higher lift camshaft especially is pushing up really hard. The springs are also harder, or also stronger and pushing back. So there's a lot of forces being exerted onto this, and if it's just pressed in, it'll come right out. So I'd say even if you're using stock heads and they don't have threaded rocker studs, get yourself some threaded rocker studs. The best setup of all, I believe, though, is like a shaft rocker setup. And that means like most, if not all, of the rocker arms are on a shaft mounted system. And that really locks them down. It's expensive though, super expensive. Also the size of that stud, these are 3/8. I think the other studs are 7/16. I'm breathing a sigh of relief because, like I said, when you first start running these down, it doesn't feel right. But as soon as you get past the first couple of turns, it's okay. I'm like, oh, these are expensive and I don't have time to fix them. Here are my push rods, also from Comp Cams. They don't have a top and bottom. If they did, they would be marked like up or top or something like that. And you get a push rod, 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 and you get a push rod. I think you get the gist. Make sure they're in the lifters. Basically, that hole that runs down through the middle of that is where the oil comes out of the lifter up through this push rod and lubricates the inside of the rocker arm, which as it exits the rocker arm lubricates the valve and everything else. So it's kind of a vital component in the oiling system. And you get a push rod, and you get a push rod. I am the push rod fairy, spreading push rods throughout the land. I no longer run 20W50 in the Fairmont. So this makes for really good assembly lube or soaking things like the rocker arms that I told you about. They're full roller rockers, so they have rollers here and roller at the tip. And I talked to the people at Comp Cams. Aluminum rocker arms are sort of falling out of favor for these steel versions. So they prefer these steel rocker arms over aluminum ones. And they do like make this stuff for a living. And I think they know a couple people in racing, you know, stuff like that. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think their opinion has value. And the argument is apparently the aluminum has more of a tendency to break, even though it's lighter. Even though these steel ones are heavier, they're stronger, they hold up better. And the rocker arms are just rocker arms. They aren't like intake and exhaust, at least on this engine. You see how these two rocker arms are sort of splayed out like this? We want the angle of attack to be directly on the tip of that valve. So that's what these push rod guides are for. So watch what happens when I slide the guide around in here. See, now those are more directly in line. But then I want to come over and look at the push rod and make sure that that is also where I like it to be. And then once it is where I want it, I'm going to tighten it down with my wrench, sneak in underneath, and then I'll just slide the rocker off, torque it down to spec, and move on. And then we'll set everything else up in the valve train. That's going to hit the inside of the head, sadly. I don't really want that. I want it rubbing there. I'll just go a little bit in on this one. All the way over, and then in just a bit. If I can get in here with the wrench. Or I'm just going to have to pop that off of there. I want the tip of that roller to hit that top of that valve square. That's my whole goal with all these. The ones on the end seem to be the ones the hardest to get to behave. And I think that's the way Chevy designed there. So they got two exhaust ports right next to each other. If they were spread out evenly, maybe that would be different, but just because of everything that's going on inside the cylinder head, there seems to be less room for adjustment on the ones on the ends than there is on the ones in the middle. Yeah, I can't get this one over any farther. The same with all of them on the ends. Now my plan is to go through, torque them all. After they're torqued, recheck them, but then I'll put the locks on and then recheck them again. We'll just keep checking and rechecking until we're done checking, until we're sure, well, we're never sure until we start it up and it runs and it doesn't explode, that everything's as right as it can be. One more thing I should share with you about these rocker arms. It was hard to show you when they were covered with oil. But you notice inside the roller part, there's a side that has a flat, and then the side that has the round. So you want to be sure when you install these that the flat side is up, and not the round side, flat side. So these are the locks that go on top of those studs. Right now they're down towards the bottom. I'm just going to run them up towards the top of the adjustment before I install them. And make sure, like I said, all the flat sides on those rockers are pointing up, because that's what these rest against. Have I mentioned how much I like this socket on the crank? It's really great. Now I need to go through and adjust all of these for proper, well, preload on the lifters. And to do that, you need to adjust them to 0 lash and then a half turn more. Is how that's done, and I'll demonstrate that here in a minute. But you want to rotate the engine around, and I'm just doing this just to see stuff at the moment, how stuff is moving. Valves are opening. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, I was afraid of that. So, let me back these off. We're going to go through one cylinder at a time. And probably the easiest way to convey this to you is, I'm going to start here at number 1 cylinder. The minute one valve starts to open, so the minute one valve starts to move, you can adjust the other one. So we'll keep an eye on these two and look for one of them to move. Okay, this guy's starting to move. So this guy's on its base circle. So we can adjust that one. To perform the adjustment, spin the push rod. And also you want to make sure that the push rod is seated down inside the lifter and seated up inside the bottom of the rocker. This is imperative, because if you get this wrong, well, everything's going to be wrong from there on out. All right, spin the push rod. Start cranking down the adjuster nut. The minute the push rod stops moving, then turn it 1/2 turn more. So take this and go 1/2 turn past tight. right there. Can lock it down. As far as the torque spec on these, snug is great. That valve is officially adjusted. Now, we'll keep turning the engine over until this one starts to move, and we know that this one's on its base circle. There it is. So we know this one's on the base circle. Same procedure. And we just keep doing this on down the line. Looks like I had to back these off just a wee bit more. Okay, so spin it. It's okay to do it a couple of times. Okay, it stopped moving right there. Zero lash. Comp Cam says to like move it up and down. My machinist said spin it. Just gonna go right there. Something I want to drop in here real quick is that half turn adjustment I found not to be sufficient. In fact, a full turn is what I recommend. On both the Ford and the Chevy, I used hydraulic roller lifters from Comp Cams in both engines. And both instances, I started things up after the fact with just the half turn adjustment, and the valve train was noisy. I had to go back and adjust the Ford to one full turn of adjustment. I did the same thing on the Chevy. The Chevy ran for a little while, got a little noisy at the top end. I went back in and did that adjustment in one full turn. After doing that, there have been no issues and the top end has been quiet. So my recommendation to you, if you're making this adjustment, go one full turn, not a half turn. And if they're all looking the same, that's a good sign. If you got one of these that's way off, scratch your head, look at it, do it again. All right, whoops. I broke it. This one here just started to move. I can tell because I can see the lifters on this side. So I'm going to adjust this one next. Stopped moving. Half turn. See, some of these, like this guy right here, I can't even go a half turn. Something I've discovered is turn these like extra far out, because when I went to tighten it before, it was actually closing in on the lock. But I know I'm on the base circle. So spinning, 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 it stops, half turn. Boop. No problem that time. By the way, these are hydraulic. It's a totally different procedure with solids. Solid valve trains. You want to get it as good as you can, but it's not like exact. It's hydraulic, so there's a little bit of fluff, a little bit of movement in there. Don't sweat like a couple of thousandths of an inch going, oh. These be all adjusted now. Let's watch it work. And listen, it's going to draw in air, push it out. Well, for those of you that made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As stated at the beginning of this video is actually taken out of a longer video about the assembly of the engine that I built for this 1990 C1500 that's behind me. I took the 350 that was in it, turned it into a 383, and well, you saw at least the valve train component assembly that I did in this video. The one real takeaway with this is when you're doing that adjustment, go a full turn instead of a half turn. I installed pretty much the exact same components on my Ford engine and had the exact same problem. When I went a half turn, I ended up with a noisy valve train until I went back and did that adjustment at a full turn. After that, Everything was hunky-dory, and I haven't experienced any issues in either engine since they've been assembled, as far as valve train noise is concerned. That being said, I'll put links in the description to additional videos, information, tools, parts, all that stuff that I use, so please check the description if you have any questions about things that you saw in this video. Also, if you have automotive questions that weren't covered in this video, I've got something for you, and that's EricTheCarGuy.com, also linked down in the description. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and do those things that help me make a living. Super appreciate that. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.